got a time squeeze because my mate's dressing as Santa to put on the Christmas lights round our way in about an hour and a half. So,
Right.
oh yeah, I'm squeezing you in, but not that it's a chore. It's something I've been looking forward to a lot.
And where are the lights being turned on?
Well, this is it. You see, I didn't know that you were from my adopted ends. I'm Leighton.
Oh, okay.
You're Walthamstow
Yeah,
originally, right?
yeah, yeah.
So the first bit of your book, when I'm going through it, I'm like, oh, that's around the corner, and I've been there, and I've been there, and I'm really interested in kind of like I'm a big football guy, so I'm really interested in like sort of history of non-league football, and there's a bit where you mention Wadham Lodge, and like
Mm.
I watch Walthamstow all the time at Wadham Lodge.
Oh, right, good.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I didn't know you were an East End boy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a proper Cockney. You can tell by my accent.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I just always thought you're so synonymous with Camden. I just thought you were like born in the Spread Eagle or something.
Yes. Maybe reborn.
Yeah, yeah, no,
No,
totally.
I've certainly died in a few Camden venues along the way.
Well, well, let's get into it. So, do you want to start? So, listen, like we're both mental, right? Or
Yes.
to do, we've definitely experienced the highs and the lows the music industry has to offer, and have complicated brains. But I also think that we are very similar in the fact that we absolutely love indie music.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with the heavy or the light?
Um, we can go heavy if you want, and then make it lighter.
Well, okay, so yeah, I've been reading the book, and
Uh-huh.
I'd seen you at that Dean McMullen gig when he was playing with his day job, Muncie Girls. I think it was the first gig I went to after the lockdown. It was my reintroduction to live music, and I saw you. And the first time I seen you in absolutely ages, and you told me you'd had a bit of a rough time. I said bit of a rough time, that you'd had a rough time,
Hmm.
and I was like really alarmed, right? Because I always look at you as just a hero, really. So I was like, oh, okay, that's really sad. And if anything happened to you, I would be gutted.
Hmm.
Obviously, the book deals with the fact that you have been through that journey. I guess where are you at now? And well, I guess where are you at now?
Yeah, I probably had more fun in the past 2 years than I had in the previous 10 years. Put it that way.
Yeah,
Um, the medication's great. I was with a psychotherapist for about a year until he signed me off. Um, I think the most curious thing was just kind of coming home from hospital and then just being told, I mean, that weren't people didn't say you can't go to gigs anymore, but that was a clear thing that possibly a trip down Camden Way wasn't on the agenda for a couple of months. And then, of course, within 3 weeks, no one was going to gigs because this thing called COVID happened. So, I suppose the one good thing looking back on the past couple of years, which have been awful for everyone, is the fact that I didn't have any FOMO because there was no mo to miss out on however you want to say it. So
a motor
that's an
flow.
extraordinary thing.
Yeah,
And also, I guess the timing of it, the state of my brain back then at the end of 2019 wasn't tremendously healthy, and the mind boggles as to what harm COVID would have done to it. Because that would be a complete shutdown of the business and everything like that. So at least mine was kind of I'd self-inflicted it upon myself, in good time. So these things there's no such thing as good timing when it comes to trying to end it all. But in this sense, the timing was okay.
do you think so? Do you feel like COVID almost? I'm always really like reluctant to say, I'm always really reluctant to say that like COVID was like good for people because it feels a bit crass in a way. But
Mm.
do you feel like the truth is that some it worked better for some people than other people, and do you feel like that period almost gave you some time to convalesce?
Yeah, I think it was just I mean, not just me. I mean, the longest time I hadn't been to a gig since 1982, but then it was the longest time for the entirety of rock and roll, the entire music industry, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Since 1951 or whenever the first rock and roll gig was. So yeah, I think for a very very small a very small minority of people, it was a good thing because it just, everything just stopped. And, you can't worry about stuff that isn't happening. Um, even when my friend sat down with my wife, Leanne, when I went home and they were talking about all these magical things like mortgage holidays and credit card funds and government schemes. And then, of course, within a month, so the most Googled topics on the entire planet as everyone tried to work out how on earth they were going to survive without getting any wages, especially in the music industry where, so many people shut down. So it was good. As I said, yeah, I mean, it was fortunate in the sense that otherwise I'd have been horribly exposed to it just because you're seeing, when a band can't tour, when a band can't record, is it actually a band? When does a band stop becoming a band?
Yeah.
And we were lucky in the sense that I think we managed to do a newsletter every single month throughout COVID, and that was primarily because of um, sort of interconnections within the bands. So there are couples in Desperate Journalist, twin brothers in China Bears, Moon Panda's a couple. The ones who had some kind of cohabiting going on managed to carry on making music. But I found that if you had a five-piece band all living in different parts of London, then it was completely impossible for them to function at all.
I mean, I guess that, like, I had, as listeners to this podcast will be acutely aware. So I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and I got diagnosed when I was at the NME, like 2008, and then I rejected that diagnosis and went off and edited Kerrang, and then when I left Kerrang, when that was my real, like, the start of my problems.
Why did you
And
why did you reject the diagnosis out of interest?
because I think that, well, I know exactly why. Because I what I the problems I was having, the things that I was experiencing, aren't things that typically, or at least at that point in history, weren't associated with OCD. So almost like them, me sitting in a psychiatric hospital in Camberwell, like a great centre for anxiety, CADAT, and they said, well, it took them seconds for them to explain what was wrong with me, and they said it was OCD. And I was just thinking about my flat. I was living on my own at the time, in Camberwell, and I was thinking, if you saw my flat, there's no way you would say I had OCD. Like, if you spoke to the production editor at the NME, there's no way they would say I was particularly organised, right? Um, and then I still knew something was wrong, and I was having treatment for anxiety all the way through Kerrang, but I the ruminations and the obsessions and the rituals, and at the height of me being ill, I was still putting out a magazine every week, but I was obsessed that people could hear my thoughts, and I was
Mm.
having to tap tables before I could leave a room and such like. So I knew that something was still wrong, but it took actually finding an OCD support group for me to actually meet other people who had less physical rituals and more of internal rituals and compulsions, for me to be like, oh yeah, they were right. It was OCD. It is OCD.
So
And then
you
that,
and this had been within you your entire life, and then the stress and pressure of turning out weekly magazines brought it to the fore, or
I think it masked it a little bit.
right?
I think that it's almost like, when I don't think there's loads of us that worked on like two weeklies, and I had like nine. No, I had about 6 months where I went to Bath and I went for a video games mag, which was a stupid idea, and I wasn't very well when I was in Bath either. But I think almost the fact that, and they're coming to take me away. Um, I think almost the fact that it's really weird. Like, when I went to work for that monthly, the video games mag, like, I felt like my heart was running at a different pace, because
Mm.
it was like, oh, I don't have to have my pages ready, or it was just so weird just to almost be on like a different clock, where I was like, what, we don't have to do anything today. Like, we can just fuck it off and go to the pub if we want to. Like, it was really, really weird for me. And so I think it actually kind of kept it at bay. But I mean, the thing with OCD is it's so misunderstood. I mean, when I was 19, when I was doing a fanzine and I was in a band and, kind of making inroads at NME, I was my first proper sort of my first, what I now know is OCD. My first sort of episode was I was absolutely obsessed with HIV. Like I just was obsessed that I was HIV positive, and there was no way I could be. And I went for tests and got got clear results, and then I would obsess that they'd got my blood mixed up. So it was always there. It's just that I didn't have the language to understand what it was. Like
Yeah,
I almost thought that everyone had those problems in
yeah.
a weird way, you know. Anyway, to sort of cut a long story short, I mean, I had a bit of an episode earlier this year, but I feel in a really good place actually. I did a friend's podcast. I did a sort of like an end of year, my favorite records this year and stuff. This morning, he was asking, how would I define this year, and I was saying, going like leaving the year and going into next year, I feel really good and really far away from where I was.
Mm,
Anyway, going right around the houses. The reason I'm saying this is that one thing I have found in recent years is there's loads of reasons why we get pushed uh, to an extreme where we would think about not being here, and quite often those things are like, I don't know, they're like the things that you watch in soap operas or in films or in literature or whatever, but a general kind of like malaise of the music industry is almost something which you wouldn't really think would be something that could push you to such a place.
mm,
But when it's been your life, it makes a lot more sense. And I feel a little bit like at this juncture in my life, like I'm 42, all I've ever known or cared about is the music press
yeah,
and 7-inch singles and fanzines and um, bombing around Camden and trying to find the next big thing and Biss B-sides. And like basically all of those things don't exist anymore. And that's a really crazy thing and fills me full of a load of misery. And in a weird way, this kind of podcast is about me sort of kicking back against that and being like, well, you know what? I am going to try and explore the minutiae of this stuff that I've always loved and gave me a reason to be.
mm,
And when I think about someone who would struggle with the collapse of the music industry, you're the first person I think of. So
right.
it kind of makes sense that you would that it would push you to a place where you ended up.
Yeah,
How do you feel like, given that things arguably aren't getting better, how does that work with your recovery from mental illness?
I think the only thing I've really changed um, is my entire social life. So,
The only thing.
yeah. So to 2008, 2019, one of the key things was, you'd be meeting up with brands, soft drink brands and Hoover brands and stuff like that. And they'd say, I remember one of them saying, we'd love to work with Fierce Panda, but ultimately it's not going to happen because we want to be Fierce Panda. And then they explained about how they wanted the glamour and the glory of, finding a Coldplay and then building them all the way up from the grassroots. And then a week later, I was just stomping around East London underneath a railway bridge by Dream Bags, Jaguar shoes, hiding from the rain. And I'd just been to the Seabright Arms to see 3 bands I couldn't remember, and I was on my way to the Victoria to see some more bands that I wouldn't end up remembering. And I thought, this is it, then, is it? This is the glory and the glamour, and that's what people don't see. But I was just pushing myself too hard. I was thinking, this is what I need to do. I felt compelled to do it. I thought, this is my job. I'd be at home and I'd be thinking, no, you must go out and see some bands you've never heard of. I'm over that now. What I do now is, I'm either checking out our own bands or I've always got someone with me. I've always got a good friend. Luckily, I've got the generation of friends now who their kids are off to university, so they've done their parenting and now they want to go back and see the wedding present and maybe even some bands they've never heard of before,
Yeah.
which is very exciting, and that makes them excellent company. Yeah, and it's just kind of just making sure you're not exposing yourself to just too much pointless nonsense. That's the key to it. That's when you realize you're in real trouble, when you spend most of your time just wasting your time, and there's no time to waste anymore. So I think, the Panda itself's got the usual 14 bands on it, and we've got, we do a monthly night at Dream Bags, Jaguar shoes, so that keeps me busy, and also, I listen to friends now, and I kind of embrace the past a bit more. A few years ago, the whole idea of going to see Coldplay at would be, I haven't got time. I've got to go and stand under a railway bridge in the pissing rain in Hackney trying to find the new Coldplay. And
Yeah.
now it's kind of all right then. I'll go along. I'll go along and get the free drinks and see what the fuss is all about. And the other day I remember I went into London from Suffolk to go and go to the 100 Club. And again, I knew what I was doing. I was thinking, the World Cup's coming up. There's going to be loads of football on. I'm going to end up, there's going to be the gig count's going to drop down. So I kind of went along, and in the end, I was satisfied by it because I went to see Buzzard, 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 who I'd never seen before. Much more 70s country rock than I expected. And I saw Slate first on, who it was their first ever London show. So I still did, I still peeled me A&R onions,
Yeah,
bumped into some really nice people there, and had a really nice night. But I still knew what I was doing. I was still thinking, you don't really have to go to this, and that's our compulsion, isn't it? That is our thing. Whether it's
yeah,
doing the fanzine or writing for the NME, becoming a journalist, that's the compulsion. Is a normal person just goes, I'll just stay at home. Bit cold outside, nice telly on. I'm on the sofa, stick a jacket potato on, and you never go out.
do you have any? I mean, do you have anything else?
Um, yeah,
D- but does that? Like I guess that, I mean, I've always loved football, but I guess that
yeah,
I guess when I really threw my, there was probably a point where I was like, yeah, I think I like going to football as much as I like going to gigs,
yeah,
which was quite a big thing for me because I was like, oh right, well, variety, spice of life, all that kind of
absolutely, yeah,
thing,
yeah, yeah.
or something else to care about. Do you have that?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing is really weird, but and it's kind of slightly annoying that the on Five Live Sports Report they've actually got rid of the classified results because that was my way of keeping in touch with everyone I've ever known. When they mention Manchester United, I think of Johnny Cigarettes.
Yeah,
When they mention QPR, I think of Ted Kessler. You go through when you think of Rochdale, you think of the drummer from Billy Mahoney. Everyone's
yeah,
got their own thing. Colchester, obviously, Steve Lamack.
yeah,
And you work and Leighton Orient is Ian from Damaged Goods, etc., etc., etc. And it's kind of a little comfort thing. Plus, of course, there's a huge amount of very very damaged indie people. Absolutely love Tottenham. It's that sense of complete failure and it's the hope
yeah.
that kills you. There's loads
There's,
of us.
there's so many QPR. It's the when the music week do their like who in the industry supports who, and the
Yeah,
QP. I mean, I worked with Paul Stokes and the NME, and all of his kind of crew, his Jamie Woolgars and his Ted Kesslers and all that, and there's just so many QPR. It's bonkers, but I suppose it makes sense given that West London at least was the centre of the music industry for
yeah,
a
absolutely. And
long
again,
time.
I'm sure there's a great book to be done about the parallels of football and music beyond the Farm remixes from
Yeah,
1990.
yeah, yeah.
I like watching Poirot and Midsummer Murders. I've got a freaky addiction to ITV3 in the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
The problem is with just like pubs. That's the thing,
Yeah,
and bands play in pubs,
yeah,
and I find that exciting. And it wasn't even the starting point, as ever when I first started going to gigs. I couldn't even get a drink till I was about 20 because I looked like a baby.
yeah.
So for the first 4 years of going to see gigs, I couldn't even get boozed up. But I think I
But
made up for that since.
what
Uh,
do you?
I
But
just
you
find
have.
it's just my happy place. That's it, really. It's kind of you know.
So did booze become a problem?
Not really, no, and only in the sense that it's just sensationally expensive, and you can't, once it's over. I think we worked out before COVID. I think we worked out that there's if you're going to Wembley Arena and places like that and getting a pint of lager, that's about 8,000 streams for one pint. Once you're up to about £7.50,
Yeah,
and you're thinking, oh, that's tough, isn't it? Mind you, it's very easy to get to the bar because everyone else is thinking, oh, I'm not paying 8,000 streams for a pint of Carlsberg.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think it was just no, that was always the thing that kind of carried me through. I think it was just a combination. What I found was that towards the end, I was kind of no one was listening. That was the point. That's why I did the book because I thought, the world won't listen, so now I'm going to put it into this book. And now I found that I was a bit worried. I didn't have a problem doing the book in the first place. I did talk to a few, even professional nurses, just saying, "Are you sure you're going to put it in there?" It's quite graphic and quite grisly, and I thought, well, all I've got left is honesty. So I might as well just put it all in there. And I've had people saying that it's taken them months to get beyond the first 4 chapters because there are so many trigger points and they can't, they've been crying too much. But there are a tremendous amount of jokes in the book as well, and some of them are even funny. Um,
Like,
and I
I
just
mean,
thought, but I did, it was only when the book was finished. The book was only finished in May. It was a very fast turnaround, and then I did suddenly have a little bit of a panic on about maybe being an outlier, but it transpires everyone else is doing the same thing. Whether it's Ted's book or Mickey's book or Nick Durden's book, there's a whole load of things out there, just exactly the same kind of vibe, isn't it?
yeah, I did Nick Durden for the podcast yesterday. The episode's not out yet, and
Right.
it may well be before or after this one. But
Yeah.
God, what an inspiring book that is.
Yeah.
Because you would think that it would be so, you'd think it would be morose, but actually he really digs in and finds, I think he describes that the people he spoke to as like the true Stoics, and I found that really inspiring.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Brian Nash from Frankie just kind of, it lasted for 2 years, but it was the greatest party in the world. you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
some things aren't designed to last forever, really, are they? Certainly if I carried on living the way I was living 10 years ago, I wouldn't be living now because the industry would have done for me. But also, I
how
found that what I found also towards the end of 2019 was just the general, just awful. Just how many people were suffering, how many people had, I'd known for years and years doing like PR jobs or whatever, and just find that their entire lifestyle had been screwed over, and they were working like three jobs just to pay the mortgage.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that like I say, this podcast is a little bit my sort of own acts of resistance. But
Yeah,
given kind of, I don't really see how things can get worse, but I don't really see things getting better either.
no.
So how does that make you feel?
Well, it's I mean, what's mainly what's broken is the thing that always worked was that connection between the indies like us and the majors. And that's been broken for a very, very, very long time. Guitar bands still get signed, but they're all absolutely bloody awful.
Yeah,
And the good stuff, the majors just don't want them. I've sat there with A&R people and talked about Idols or Fontaines, and normally by now they'd have snapped up the next generation, but they're just going, but yeah, I mean, they might get to number two in the charts, but the streaming numbers are rubbish, and that's all they're interested in.
yeah,
And then another A&R man says, "Oh, our modus operandi for signing acts now is, you're either 17 years old or you're going ballistic on TikTok, or probably both at the same time."
mm,
So that's awful and culturally catastrophic. But then it just means that on the underground, people are just allowed to just go a little bit batshit. I mean, Idols tried for years and years and years to play the game, didn't they?
yeah,
Be like a piss poor Maccabees, and
yeah,
that was a quote from the manager.
yeah,
And as soon as they just made music what they liked, it took off. They really broke the mold, didn't they?
yeah.
And
That's definitely. I mean, it's really weird, obviously, kind of growing up being into kind of punk and indie pop and Riot Girl and all the stuff that I love. That was always kind of preached at me. It was always that thing of like, that's why people chose an independent route. But actually, more than ever, that really rings true with me. That kind of like trying to do the right thing, and I mean this even outside of just being in a band. Trying to do the right thing isn't really the right thing to do at all. Like
mm,
doing what you want to do, I
yeah,
think is the way.
yeah. Yeah. And also Joe came out with a great quote as well, didn't he, about Idols? Said, okay, well, it's taken us 10 years to break through and get to Ali Pali. That just don't treat it like a career. One day you might end up like us, but we certainly, the moment we thought, I'm just going to go and become a dentist and become the most punk rock dentist in Bristol, that's when that's when all the opportunities opened up, wasn't it?
So
So
my
what I'm
so,
saying is, so out there, the music out there is brilliant. There's so much stuff.
well, it's
Uh,
always the
you
way,
know,
isn't it?
But we just booked Pandemonium for January, booked in 21 bands, and it was the easiest one so far. I think you've got bands like Avoid doing absolutely brilliant Parisian grunge noise, and bands like Moist Crevice just doing like shrieking banshees guitar, falling down a flight of stairs, falling down another flight of stairs. There's everywhere, every night in London there's something absolutely amazing on.
Yeah,
Doesn't necessarily mean it's amazingly good or amazingly commercial, but it's amazing, full stop. That's the key thing.
I guess the thing I mean, obviously I'm not in the record business like you, but I guess that what I worry about or what I miss, or what I crave, or what I would love to try and play my own part in restoring, is that I feel like because the music press is basically gone, and I feel like because say like and there's a danger of sounding like an old fart here, but because there's not like a Lamac figure or like Radio One, and there's certainly not Appeal. There was all of these kind of places that almost kind of help build the culture
Mm.
of like of bands, basically, and it's almost like somewhere along the line, and I noticed this at NME. I remember speaking to another journalist at NME and him saying, "I think it's arrived where music is just another thing for people," and
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I just couldn't accept that, and I think that's what I miss more than anything. Do you feel like that changes, or do you feel like I'm totally off base with that?
No, I think the that it's not necessarily reading the enemy wasn't necessarily about finding about the hottest new band or reading about who was single of the week that particular week or single of the week number four, as the case may be. It was a general education. If you're a new band and you wanted to gig in London, you'd look through the live reviews and
Yeah.
you'd go and you'd see the Falcon and you'd see the Bull and Gate and you'd see the Fulham Greyhound, and then you'd send them demos. Those days are gone. I talked to bands from outside London. The first six London shows are all bloody awful because they've just got promoters blagging it and claiming that their venue. I'm not going to mention any names, but they're fairly obvious once you're out beyond the Shacklewell and the Victoria and such like. And the bands are sort of lured in to do these terrible, terrible gigs because there's no reference point anymore
Mm.
until someone like us latches onto them, and then we sort of try and guide them along and put them on with slightly less mercenary promoters. I had one band recently from Norwich, and they were due to play a gig in Hackney, and the promoter was all over them, just going, "Yes, absolutely marvelous." And then when he found out they were from Norwich, he just pulled the gig because he said, "Well, you're not going to bring anyone." And it's
Mm.
like, well, it's like
Yeah.
I'm not going to put on the Stone Roses because you're from Manchester, so you don't know anyone in Leighton. What's the, it's just it's alarming, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
really really strange thing. So those are the little things. Plus, the general sort of the Lexington the Lexington the lexicon of music journalism was just the most beautiful thing, wasn't it? One of the comments I've had about my book is that it's just full of puns, and I don't think it is. I think it's just the natural flow of it. Of course, if you're going to reference, not seeing orange juice, you're going to say, I miss them in the flesh of my flesh, because that's what you do, isn't it? It's just that's the way your brain operates.
Yeah.
You're not sitting there looking up Guinness Book of British Hit Singles to find a good joke about orange juice, are you?
Yeah, but I remember getting pissed with Tim Johns once, and him. We were talking about the enemy, obviously, because when you work at the enemy, that's all you ever do is talk about the enemy.
Yeah,
And we were talking about like we were saying just the thing that would, we were probably catastrophizing like a good kind of sort of like a good kind of 10 years before it did kind of become something else, and he was saying the thing that would upset him most is if the enemy went, it's almost like there's an entire language that would go, like
yeah,
almost as in, it's like I don't know. I've done some writing for like American titles, and like it's so fucking boring, and it's so just their entire way that they see music and pop culture is just rubbish. And when I was reading like your book, I was just like, it's not that sort of over reliance on puns. It's just that like I used to read writing like that all the time,
yeah,
and like you're a bit of an outlier because of it, really.
yeah.
It's like I always wonder like how Mark Beaumont like writes like birthday cards or something. Do you know what I mean? Like is there like a gag in there?
Yeah. There is. It's just. I mean, that's the power of email as well, isn't it? You get some of the stuff that comes out in email is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Just by you don't even mean to do it.
I, I
But you're absolutely right. I think it is just that that culture, that kind of spirit of it, and that kind of the thing that's gone now. That is the saddest thing of all, is that everything that is written is basically good, isn't it? Because there's no time or space to write about rubbish, whether that's in the Sunday Times, where their album reviews seem to get shorter every single week, or Mojo, that where I can get in touch with Jenny Bully tomorrow and she'll tell me that June is already booked up for 2025.
yeah.
Because the amount of material that's out there in terms of reforming bands and retrospectives and everything like that. So I
Well,
guess
what I wanted
that's why I think it's why it's healthy for Fierce Panda. We know our place. That's it. In the olden days, we imagined that we could actually be sitting at the top table and at the Ivor Novellos and stuff like that. And I think now we've understood that that's absolutely not going to happen.
Well,
So
that probably doesn't sit very well with what I was going to say next. Is that,
right.
what I want to know is like, what are we going to do about it? Like, I don't I don't feel like, I don't feel done. Like, I loved that stuff far too
Yeah,
much to be kind of like, oh well, that was a thing. That was the thing that I liked, and now it doesn't kind of really exist. Like, I just think that culture is kind of worth fighting for, and I also feel like there's so many like good music books.
yeah.
I went out with Peter Robinson recently, and he was saying, you know what, there's nowhere for anyone to write, but some of the music journalism around is the best I've ever read, and
Well,
I
this
I
is
I,
yeah,
I, I, I agree with that.
and this is definitely part of the part of the timing for me was I'd done I'd finished the Johnny Moped book for Damaged Goods, and that was about May 2020, and then I had a bit more time on my hands, so I just started doing the Panda stuff, the Panda book, and then it was only after a year when I thought, I wonder who's going to put this out. I'd nudged Ian at Damaged Goods a few times, but he didn't seem to be that excited about a second book from me. So and then I heard about Mickey Lush's book, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder who the publisher is. And then I sent a précis off to this email address, and then I read the small print, and it just said, if you haven't got a book agent, then don't bother getting in touch with us. So I thought that was a waste of a damn good précis. And then after a week, Pete Selby from 9/8 got in touch saying, of course I'm aware of Fierce Panda, and let's talk more. And I kind of managed to get a deal. And one of his things was that he just said there's just all this talent lying around, and so White Rabbit are doing a lot of stuff as well. They did Ted Kessler's book. On My World, it's got Bob Stanley's on there, Will Hodgkinson's on there, I'm on there, and then he's got the sort of outlier artists like Mickey and Nadine Shah. So he just says that there's so many stories to be told. It's almost just the next inevitable stage. You started off with the weekly magazines, then it turned into monthly magazines, and now it's book. Maybe it's that kind of next step.
So I'm
Plus,
so
he says it's really good with music journalists doing books because they don't tend to be libelous. So it means it doesn't have to go through, sit there with lawyers for 6 months. He says most of the time the copy is incredibly clean.
I'll be honest, I did read one recently that was very fucking libelous, but
But
I'm going to move on from that. There's so my book is so my the book I'm writing is I'm due. My deadline is the end of January, and I've probably got about another 40,000 words to go.
yeah,
How did you write yours before basically the deal, or
yeah, I
just a
don't.
sample chapter, or?
Yeah, my whole approach was I'd find a way of doing it. My good friend Andy McLeod had done his Anoint My Head book, about his story about being a failed Britpop star, and being managed by Ricky Gervais in the olden days.
Oh yeah, I keep meaning to reach out to him actually.
Yeah, and he's got a quote on there about, I don't know, it's a quote from the NME for a live review, just sort of desperately uninteresting, over the top singer or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
And then I actually commissioned that review. Weirdly enough, I told Mark Sutherland to go down there, and he gave him an absolute kicking. And then it
Oh,
turns out, all these years later, we've been putting on gigs together for about 20 years now. So not every bad review has terrible knock-on effects.
no,
Um,
no.
but yeah, I kind of he just did it himself. He just self-published. So I thought, well, worst case scenario, I'll just do that. Um, and then and then, but the idea was that the hospital stuff was going to be in the book, and I'd worked out how to do it. And when I talked to the publisher, he thought it should be in a real block. It should be a block of hospital stuff and then the music stuff. And I just said it's just too heavy and self-indulgent and boring.
Yeah,
I think if you spread it out, and I didn't realize the actual effect of it until I did the audio book. And the most painful things to write about were the easiest things to talk about, just because it's
yeah,
really light.
yeah.
The hospital diary entries are just literally, it's written like a 15-year-old girl. Dear diary, there I was, 2:30 in the afternoon. Dr. Rock comes over and tells me that Death Cab for Cutie got him through med school, and then followed by 3,000 words on life at the NME, written
Yeah,
like a proper NME journalist, which is very, very heavy going.
yeah,
I mean, the one great thing though was the he did with publisher Pete. I said, one of the early stages. I said, so if we're going to talk about Knicky, should I say that they feature singer Lauren Laverne, who's now on your TV screens and stuff like that? And he said, nope, just write it like you would normally write. Just don't over elaborate, because let's face it, most people would know who she is anyway if they
Yeah,
bought this book, and
yeah,
B, if they don't, then there's Google.
yeah. No, that's good advice. Actually, I might have just lost about 10,000 words of my right there. Um, on, on thanks for that. On I want to ask you. I want to ask you about this a bit. I want to ask you a bit about Panda, because it was so important in like shaping my taste when I was like growing up. And definitely like sort of the split band EPs and stuff were like such an event. They were things I really looked forward to and craved. Like, but it always sort of had that reputation of like, oh, here's almost like your favorite band, but early.
Yeah,
Like here's tomorrow's favorite band today.
yeah.
Like, did you feel like, obviously you had so many bands that kind of passed through in doing that? Did you want Panda to be more of a stable?
Yeah, eventually we did, but not for the first few years when I was at the NME. It was just a hobby,
Yeah,
and then it was only I think after we'd done Idlewild, and then there was basically people in the industry just said, why don't you go and do a deal? And it was like, all right then. I wouldn't have had the gumption to think about it myself. I didn't know how it operated. I just presumed, as all these bands went off to major labels, I thought that's just what's always happened from the Farmers Boys in moving to EMI in 1984 to The Cure leaving Small Wonder in sort of 1978. I thought that was, virtually very hard to think of a single crossover-y kind of indie band who never did that. Maybe probably in the UK, it's probably only Depeche Mode and New Order. And
yeah,
even then, they probably, got bankrolled in North America by separate deals. So no, it's just, it was only, and then, every time we really wanted to keep hold of a band, whether it would be Art Brut or the Walkman or Coldplay or Keen, we were always in a position where someone was bankrolling us. It was just we just tended to have political disagreements with those people rolling that bank money
yeah, yeah,
the wrong way down the hill.
yeah.
So yeah, no, it's it just and it's weird looking back, because sometimes even you think, were we just ambulance chasing? I guess when we did Embrace and the music, that's the nearest we came to sort of playing the game. But apart from that, normally that first significant A&R bun fight would be the launch single on Fierce Panda.
Yeah.
We were there kind of like 2 months ahead, or it's not strictly two, because it was something like Coldplay. We shouldn't have been allowed to get anywhere near them, but everyone in the music industry had already seen them in the city and passed on them.
So, so in a weird way, you feel like Panda. So in that case, it was more like Panda sweeping up mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. For a couple of them, I mean, there's some. They all work on different levels. I mean, this is the same with all bands. All bands are absolutely incredibly different. And so, I'd say for the likes of Placebo and the Maccabees, that was just the right place at the right time. You knew those bands were absolutely going to go and fly, you know, through the indie world. Coldplay and Keane had just been rejected by every single major label because they just couldn't see the commercial potential. But then so did virtually every band of that generation. The whole Britpop thing was so damaging, wasn't it? The end of it, by what's the story about 1999 when the NME was reduced to putting on Ultrasound and Campag Velocet and Gay Dad on the front
What,
cover.
what,
And,
what,
and
hear,
obviously,
what, what hear a word against ultrasound, but the rest are
no,
fine.
well, that's literally two bands that are on Fierce Panda. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was very proud of that.
yeah.
And at that same
Actually,
time,
speaking of which, you don't happen to have a copy of Floodlit World lying around here.
I've got my own personal copy, which is scratched to buggery. Didn't it not come out in some massive deluxe edition on One Little Indian earlier this year?
Oh, that's
Because Derek Burke got all the rights to the nude catalogue, didn't he?
well, one little independent. They're now
Yes,
called,
sorry,
as far as I know.
yes, very clear, very good.
Just to be slightly
Yeah.
more woke than this podcast ever is.
Not One Little
Um,
Inuit.
yeah, no, I'll hunt out. No, absolutely, that version is miles better than the one that made it on the record.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
let me ask this as well. So, I always wanted to know. This is more of a fan question more than anything. I always wanted to know about the Oasis single, the You know, because it was like it was such a buzz that I mean I was at school for fuck's sake. Like when I bought that record, like how I think I know how it comes about, but was that cleared? Was that did you ever get any? Did you ever get in any trouble for that?
No, no. I mean, we did it very, very carefully. So, there's actually on the record, there's no reference to Oasis whatsoever, thanks to the mighty power of the asterisks. And we didn't use any images of the brothers. It was we used the Cray twins instead.
Oh
Yeah, and we
really?
went right through it. Yeah, of course, yeah, we were as we'd like to pretend that we were, flapping around the office, honking like geese at our punk rock sensibilities. But in fact, we were just waiting for the phone to ring, and sure enough, Sony's lawyers got in touch because Creation went through Sony. And then it turned out they'd heard the release was hilarious. They just wanted us to bike a copy over.
Wow.
And they paid for the bike, which was nice.
Yeah.
We had the chart people. That was scary because they said it looks like it's going to go top 40. Can you send over some information? And I'm thinking, yeah, this is going to be. Was it true that was it? Have I lost my mind, or did Mark Goodyear actually play "Killing in the Name"? Didn't he play the full version on
Yeah.
the Dark
Yeah.
Rundown the first time?
Yeah.
Sitting there counting 17 f bombs, and that's Child's Play next to this Oasis thing.
Yeah.
It's the
Absolutely. Yeah.
sweariest record of all time.
Absolutely.
And in the end, it went at 52, so that was okay. We got away with that one. Highest ever entry for a spoken word release.
How many sales is at that point in history though? That's like more than that's like double what you'd get for number one now, right?
Probably, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Two formats,
Yeah.
and then we got a call to the NME from the representative of the Craze saying that
No.
the twins weren't entirely happy a bit about being associated with a couple of reprobates like Noel and Liam Gallagher.
Oh, I
So,
do remember this now. I do remember this. Yeah, God, your fellow EastEnders.
yeah,
Who who did all the artwork? I used to love how odd the artwork was
yeah,
for those
that was
records.
just me and Pritt Stick and just stealing stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
Amazing.
actually, reference one. We did a split with Solex and Laptop, and
Oh
we had
yeah.
an excellent picture of Johan Cruyff on the front, which I was reminiscing happily about during with the World Cup thing because he was a massive smoker, and obviously he
Amazing.
couldn't smoke in the stadium, so he was sitting there sucking lollipops on the bench, and we
Yeah.
went for
Yeah.
proper Dutch orange. I mean, the jokes they were so multi-layered. Each EP was just absolutely painstakingly glorious to do.
Yeah.
There were just so many pun after pun after pun. It was just excruciatingly brilliant.
Where did Fierce Panda come from?
They're not fierce, and because we only thought that we'll just do, and I like pandas, and we only thought we'd ever do one release, which was a tribute to New Wave of New Wave, because we thought it needed a tribute because it was good fun and it was our punk rock. So yeah, if I'd known that I'd still be talking about the label 29 years later, I might have put a bit more effort into thinking about its name, like and called it, I don't know, desiccated or something.
It's
Or
kind of it's weird though. There's like I'm in a band called Jobbers, and pandas are our whole thing. I'll have to send you the last single, like because the video's got pandas all the way through it,
right.
and and I didn't even twig. Like I was like recently I was like, oh yeah, Fierce Panda. I wonder whether that was on some level. And then there's this band called Slug, who
Yeah.
are friends of mine from Sunderland, who their next record's coming out. It's the last episode of the podcast. Again, I'm timestamping things, but they all have panda masks when they play, and I'm a bit like, oh,
Okay.
there's a little kind of panda clique
Yeah.
that's
Someone
emerging.
someone saw David Gedge perform in Walthamstow recently, and he was talking about his history and how his band before the Wedding Present was, of course, the Lost Pandas. Uh,
Ah.
okay, all everything flows, doesn't it?
Listen, I better get off to see my mate.
Do the Christmas lights.
Yeah, make a fool of himself. But we should do a part two at some point.
Hmm.
Now that we've got all the heavy stuff out of the way, because
Yes.
I've got loads more fan questions.
Right.
I would love to ask, and also I'd love us to work out more about how we're going to save the music industry.
Hmm.
But let's do that maybe in the new year.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Brilliant, Simon. Thanks so much for making time for me, mate.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
All right, dude. Take care, man.
Take
Bye.
care.